Hello and welcome everybody to our final career talk this year. So it's also our first career talk in English, and I'm looking very much forward to it. So my name is Dr. Iris Köhler. I've been working now for 5 years as a career coach and trainer for scientists, and I've been a scientist myself before that. And so I've started this career talk series because I just saw that so many people have questions about what our career options are for the PhD. And I think it's always best to learn from firsthand experience. So I'm very happy that Fola is joining us here today, Dr. Fola Ogungbemi. And so welcome, Fola.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Luis. It's my pleasure to be here and the English version of the Scientist Coach podcast.
So Fola, you studied chemistry in Nigeria and then came to Germany, studied ecotoxicology, also did your PhD in ecotoxicology at the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research. So this is also where where we met. And now you're working in the regulatory field. So you're working in product compliance. And so I was thinking that we'll first start with a little information about what is product compliance. Actually, maybe there's people here who have never heard of it. And then we'll go into a little bit more detail regarding your career path, the transitions, and then also your current job. So what would you say? How would you explain product compliance to somebody who's maybe never heard of it?
Yeah, thanks, Iris. I think this is a very good icebreaker for the podcast, as I myself used to be confused on what product compliance means, and it has several interpretation depending on who you ask. But first, from my current knowledge, product compliance means the regulatory compliance of a physical product to regulations. And this could mean environmental regulations, legal regulations, or sustainability regulations, for example. So now to make people understand that better, every day we come into contact with different products. This could be the food we eat of products, or it could also be like, detergent, soap, pesticides, also computer, we come into contact with products every day. Now, if we start from the things that we consume, that we eat, compliance for such products would mean, is this product doing its function? Is it performing its function? And does it have side effects? Or is it causing some kind of damage that we do not know about? So the person or manufacturer of such product needs to investigate all of this if the product is performing its function and if it is performing other functions that we do not ask it to perform, and how to reduce such additional functions that we do not need. So that would be, and then documenting all of this into a report, which then leads to the acceptance to place such product on the market for it to be sold. So kind of it's like the safety of the product. And in my particular circumstance, product compliance refers to chemical products, and therefore we do not consume chemical products, even though some people might tend to consume kids or babies. So overall, when it comes to chemical products, product compliance relates to, does it cause harm to the environment? When it gets to the environment, does it harm fish or invertebrates in the environment? Or even when you touch it with your skin, is it hazardous to your skin? So overall, this relates to physical chemical hazards, environmental hazards, and human health hazards, and that would be product compliance.
And so how did you decide to move into that field? So I mean, you studied chemistry and then ecotoxicology, so I can definitely see a connection there. But often people, when they're doing a PhD, they're thinking about, hey, why not stay in academia, do more research? And so when did you know, yeah, I would like to transition into that field. How did that happen?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Uri. So, in the same way, just like many other people who would always think about transitioning out of academia, it happened similarly for me. When I was about finishing my PhD, I had few options, and I wanted to explore each of the options. I would explain two of those. My first option was to do a postdoc. So it's not what I'm doing right now. However, I did not want to um, apply for postdoc positions. I wanted to come up with my own postdoc proposal and then get funded for that. It was so I was clear. I knew what I wanted to do, because my idea was that I wanted to my postdoc phase would grant me three things. Number one, I wanted to acquire new skills that I had not acquired during my PhD. And number two, I wanted to prepare myself for a future career in a very specialized area in the industry where the 1% of scientists are working. And number three, I also wanted to acquire future skills like AI, machine learning. So it was clear to me what I wanted to do, and therefore I prepared a postdoc proposal for that. And unfortunately, this was during COVID. If my proposal was high quality, I'm saying that because I received comments back from panels about this, and then it was just because of the competition during that period and the lower funding available during the COVID period. So I didn't get my idea funded, even though I had, for the postdoc proposal, I had to also collaborate with scientists in the Netherlands, also in France. It was supposed to be like an EU funded project. But this didn't work. But luckily for me, I had a second plan. And the second plan was something I was already familiar with, which is to transition into regulatory science. During my PhD, I'd already had contact with regulatory science. My PhD topic involved topics like that. So I was already curious, how can my research actually make impacts in the regulation? How can it change the way we evaluate hazard? So I was already familiar with that. And then because I usually attend a CTAC conference, the Society for Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry, this conference usually have scientists, like academic scientists, but also industry scientists, and also authority regulators, like that's government, together discussing. So through that, I'd also gained more familiarity, and I also started to speak to industry scientists, the consultants, that, okay, how is your work? Because we have the perception that industry is boring. We don't have a curriculum and things like that. So I did the so-called informational interview with
Yeah, that's very important. Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And I learned that, they told me that every day for them is different. It's exciting. It's interesting. So at that time, this was my second plan, and I began to apply for roles. Just to mention, my third option was to actually be an entrepreneur, but that's bad. But right now, it's not. It has not emancipated in the full way. But, yeah, I would stop there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I really like that you had this clarity, yeah, that you said, well, okay, if I do a postdoc, then this is what I want from it, yeah. Working on a specific topic, learning new skills. So really great clarity, because I think what often happens is that people, yeah, then just start a postdoc and not really thinking about what they actually want from it or how it could be helpful for the next career steps. And then I think it's often just then kind of postponing this question of, okay, what what am I actually going to do? In which way do I want to develop? So yeah, I think that is really good advice to really have this clarity. Ask yourself, what do you want? And then also to say, well, okay, if I can't have this, or if I can't get this, if it's not working out, then what's the plan B? And you already mentioned it, these informational interviews. So I don't know if everybody is familiar with this term, but this is really a great tool to learn about career paths. So just talking to people who work in positions that interest you, to learn about what is it like, and then maybe also get new information. And often we have these like prejudices and think, oh, this is like boring to work in product compliance, and then hear from the people who work there, and then you might be surprised that it's actually really interesting and might be a good fit for you. Yeah. Yeah, and then you started your first job. This was at Rambo, I think.
Yeah.
And the title was regulatory consultant. So how did you get that job? Was this like through network? Did you know people there, or did you apply to a position, and then what did you do actually there?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Irish, for that
Mm-hmm.
question. So, this is a very interesting question. So, I would give more details if you
Mm-hmm.
don't want. So, um, when I already started to, so the first step I took when I was ready to start applying, this was about a year before the end of my PhD, that after like few years of not applying to jobs, you are a bit rusty. So I needed to know, okay, how do I even start writing a CV? How do I start writing? Well, it's not like I didn't know how to do this before, but you needed to know what is the standard today, and it's fairly for the kind of roles that I'm looking for. So actually, what I did first was that at the OFZ, where where you supported us in the past, I think at that time there was someone who was also supporting PhDs. So I just had a consultation with her, and she gave me some point, and then she also actually reviewed my CV for me. So this was the first step that I took, because
Yeah.
I knew I needed to learn something from someone, and this was very helpful. So from
Mm-hmm.
there, I took some weeks to revise my CV, my cover letter. Then I started applying. Of course, I also checked out which roles that I wanted to apply to, like in consulting or in industry. I started applying. So I would say for like 6-7 months, all of this was before I defended my and I applied to about, let's say, 80 to 100 jobs. And during those period, I got only 10, maybe 10 to 12 interviews. So roughly 10% interview rate, which is also the norm. I mean, it's a bit more or less, but for me, it was around, it followed the normal distribution. So 10% interview rate. And but none of them resulted into a real job. And then afterwards, so as soon as I defended, there was now more focus, applying to jobs became my full-time job. Because I was briefly unemployed, not fully unemployed, because I still had like some contract with like some sort of post-PhD contract. I could finish some papers, but it was clear that my focus had changed to getting my next position. So afterwards, I kept on applying, and what struck me was that my interview rate increased massively from, I would say, from 10% to probably more than 50%. So which means that job I applied to, I was called for an interview. And of course, because I'm very curious, I'm like, okay, why is this happening? So I need to know even though all through the period, I'd always changed my CV. So when I go for interview, I learned what these people wanted. I always reflected it in my CV at every point in time. So my CV was never static. It was always every week changing something. But then looking back, I realized that this is also just an assumption, because you never know why things happen. But my assumption is that number one, it was because after my PhD, for the first time after living in Germany for several years, I took an intensive German course, which gave me which increased my German proficiency from A2 to B2, and also B2 certificate. This gave me the opportunity and the confidence to start applying in German, which means I could use a German CV and also prepare myself to interview in German. This was a
Yeah.
change in my application strategy.
So before you finished the PhD, when you like sent out these 80 to 100 applications, they were all in English?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, and then you switched to German, and that made a big difference? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's, I think, something which I also see quite a bit. I mean, also when you look at the job opportunities, there's still, or at least from my impression, yeah, really this requirement of speaking German. So I think it's really helping if you have something to show that you have the German knowledge if you're looking for jobs at yeah, at the German job market. At least that's my impression. What do you think with your experience?
Yes, yes, definitely. This helps. So, I mean, it's possible to get a job without German proficiency. That's clear. But it's just that German proficiency improves or increases your chances. Like, which means, before, if you don't have German proficiency, you would not typically apply to roles advertised in German. You would typically want to look for English roles, which is also okay. But the difference here is that you then have a greater pool of jobs to apply to, and that was also what probably happened in my case. That I was still applying to English jobs, but then I had more confidence to now apply to German jobs where they clearly state German proficiency is necessary. Not some of them, even though they did not state that, if it was advertised in German, I just apply also with a German CV. If it was advertised in English, I use an English CV. So that was the first thing. Then the second thing that I did was also clearly that I now had my PhD certificate. So because before that, it was always like not clear to the people if I was still doing the PhD or not and all of that. But then I could clearly say finished. This was like a milestone ended, and this I believe this also helped. And then, of course, Rambo was one of those that I interviewed for, and I think, yeah, even though when I was interviewing for Rambo, I had other interviews as well, but it was the first offer that I got, and yeah, and I just went with the first offer.
Yeah. And then what did you do at Ramble? So, as a regulatory consultant, like what was your job?
Yeah. So, like I explained when I defined product compliance, it's similar. So at Rambo, my job was basically to support clients, which are mainly industry manufacturers of chemicals, um, in supporting them in getting their products registered at the European Chemical Agency, and then which gives them the opportunity to keep their products on the market, because chemical products typically require periodical registration, maybe 10 years. So after 10 years, you also need to update your dossier. That's like the registration documents. And every time you need to always check if your documents are complete, if your risk assessment, that's like if your chemical is not causing harm to the environment, is it still up to date with today's science and state of the art? So basically, at Rambo, I was still doing science. This was for me a a surprise because like you said, many people have the perspective that regulatory roles are administrative based and all of that. But for me, and I think this is also probably one of the reasons why I was hired, I could directly transfer a lot of my PhD technical expertise into my new role, like the science that I did. Of course, I was not writing papers, but I was still reading papers, and I needed the concept that I acquired in order to solve problems in my job.
So there were a lot of skills from the PhD that you could use in this new role, like, yeah, researching the literature, understanding,
Yeah.
of course, the chemistry. And then what would you say, like, what were maybe new things that you had to learn for that role?
Yeah. So if you here, I learned a lot. So I used to say that my first job at Rambo was the hardest endeavor that I ever embarked upon in my life. So, and maybe I'm exaggerating this a bit, but yeah, it's just a saying that makes me feel good about my success on this job. So, uh, there, apart from transferring my expertise, my technical expertise from my PhD and from my education, I needed to learn how to work as a consultant. And this is important because many people usually think industry is industry, but when I worked, it was working as a scientific consultant or so-called regulatory consultant. This is clearly different from working in the industry. So industry are the ones producing, they're the manufacturers. Consultants, just like management consultants, we are supporting the industry to fulfill, to ensure that they stay in business. So regarding that, the things that were really difficult for me to master at my job at Rambo were several factors played a role, but I would give few of those just to give an insight into how this was for me. So there are three factors that I'll give that will help people understand the difference between academia and consulting. And so this is not industry consulting. So number one is time. So in academia, we consider time as a resource, which means that I start my PhD, I'm giving some research topics or question, and I'm giving also time. It could be 1 year to just research this, read, and yeah, at the end of the day, you come up with something. Which means I could spend so much time to find a detailed solution to a problem. However, in consulting, time is a product to be sold. And this is a major difference, which means that in consulting, I need to spend the shortest time in order to offer a competitive price. And that means overall, my productivity becomes a different metric compared to academia. The second point is productivity, that I just said earlier. In academia, productivity is measured by the depth of knowledge, which means even though I spend, let's say, 1 year doing literature search, at the end of 1 year, if I am able to provide a meta-analysis or a literature survey, which results in a publication with, summarizing all of this literature, that's a big success, right? But in consulting, it's the opposite, because in consulting, productivity is measured by value, not by the depth of the knowledge, which means value determines knowledge, not knowledge determining value. So which means, and here, what is value? Value is what does my clients want and expect? What do they consider to be valuable? Of course, my client does not consider me performing literature search and reporting that in a publication as value. So, and this is something for the consultant to think about, to constantly ask the client, every time you're asking, what do you consider to be value? And the third point is problem orientation. In academia, we are problem oriented. So which means, we need to understand the big problem, in order to create solutions to the problem. Whereas in consulting, we need to be solution oriented. And that means that we need to basically think about the solution to a small part of the problem and about that, and hoping that would actually, show up more solution. And with time, you then solve the bigger problem. And all of these are connected to each other because you do not have time. So which means if I can solve a small problem in a short time, that's definitely more valuable than me taking a long time to solve bigger problems. I would say these are the three key things or key metrics of work that for me was personally difficult.
Yeah.
It took me at least 6 months to requires a mental shift in the way you work. It's just like in academia, we worked like this for several years, and then here this is like a different way of working. And to end, I usually say when I mention these differences that this is not castigating or criticizing academia, and I want to make it clear that this style of working in academia is necessary, because without it, we cannot get the kind of output and result that we get from academia. And we as consultants, we make use of publications from academia, which helps us to do our quick solutions. And without that, we are not able to work efficiently. So I would like to say a big appreciation and, well done and kudos to all my colleagues in academia who are doing the hard lifting. Actually, this is the hard work. We are just taking pieces of their hard work and applying it. So kudos and thanks to all
Yeah. Yeah.
sides that are supporting us in this way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's also really important to understand what those differences are, and then also to ask yourself, would this be an environment that I, would thrive in? Because I mean, I think there's many doctoral researchers who would say, well, okay, I enjoy doing research, I enjoy my work, but phew, I actually find it maybe quite exhausting to have to always work on those really big problems. And, then you publish a paper and it's not something where I like solve an actual problem in the real world, or having like smaller projects where you can then really see, okay, now I finished this and here's the outcome and this project is done, and then I start something new. So I think this is also what many people then find attractive, about moving into other roles where you have this different different use of time and different views on what is actually the value. Yeah. hmm Yeah. And did you, so this first role, was it a lot of like your work? Was it in English, or did you have to speak German on that job? Because I could imagine that might have also then, of course, added to this very steep learning curve and the challenges.
Yeah. Um, that is interesting because in my first role, although I'd already reached B2 proficiency, but when it comes to communication, my confidence was really bad. So I could not really communicate in German so much. And I would say in my first role, I still used, let's say, 80% of English in the role because the job itself is English, right? So the technical work that I do, reading papers, writing reports, all of this was in English. In some cases, there were internal meetings. They were in German, which if I had to contribute in those meetings, um, I would ask to use English, which is okay. But I would say one-on-ones with my boss or with my colleagues wasn't English because this was easier. So at that time, my German was difficult to comprehend, tasks. So they knew I just tell them, well, if this is a task for me, please just let me in English, because if you don't, then we all waste our time. So basically, yeah, it was 80% in English, and the 20% that was in German was probably because I was a passive listener in the meeting, or yeah, it was not a deal breaker. But yeah.
hmm Yeah. And so you worked in that role for how many years? I don't remember right now.
Yeah, it
It
was a
was
very short stint. It was about 10 months.
10 months. Yeah. Yeah. So kind of an introductory role, you, so to say, got your foot in the door, first job in industry, and then you moved on to your current position.
Yeah.
And so you want to share, how did that transition happen? How did you manage to secure that job?
Yeah, sure. So, well, first, maybe people will be curious to know why did I intend to switch, change. So my first job at Rumble was in Munich, in Germany. This is in southern part of Germany, and there, it's one of the most expensive cities to live in. So in the whole 10 months that I lived there, you won't believe it that I could not secure an apartment for myself. And even though I was staying in a room, I was renting a room in an apartment, so on, but I just did not succeed to get an apartment for myself. So, and I told myself after 6 months, if this was like a sign that Munich was not for me, and maybe I was also not satisfied. I was, yeah, basically, I just told myself, so as soon as it was 6 months, Yeah, I tried a bit, but it didn't work. So I started applying. So I knew that yeah, maybe this is the time to switch. I was enjoying the job, but also just because of the circumstance, I was not just happy overall. And I started applying. Of course, in this case, it was way easier for me because
Mhm.
of course, I had learned a lot from my first stint of job applications. I knew a lot more how to apply, and I was already in the industry. So I think after a few applications, I there was higher chances of getting interview. And yeah, and I also went with the first offer that I got at Currenta. I had to attend two interviews, one online with my direct boss, and then the second I had to come down to Leverkusen where the company,
Mhm.
and then I had to have, like I gave a presentation, but also one-on-one interview with all of the senior leaders there. And yeah, that was quite interesting. And for me, the reason why going back, this my interview at Corinta was interesting was that years ago, I'd applied for a fellowship at Bayer because Bayer used to be Corinta used to be part of Bayer for people who don't know. So I'd visited this site maybe 2016.
Mhm.
Uh, Even though I did not get that fellowship, so for me, it was really like a dream come true when I visited the same site, similar to where I was 2016.
Mhm.
It was nostalgic, and for me, I knew that yeah, this I would really like to work here again,
Yeah.
considering the prestige that Bayer has and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And yeah, so I think with my introduction role at Rambo,
Mhm.
even though this is 10 months, if you consider this on a scale of job experience, I would say I'd acquired 2 years of experience because,
Mhm.
as I said, I gave it my all. So I learned as much as I could from all of the seniors there, and so I believe after 10 months I was right for to convince anyone. And because my job at Rambo and my current job at Currenta were 80% intersecting. So basically just taking all my technical expertise to the new job. I didn't need to, struggle with any new thing. So that was quite easier transition compared to the one from academia to Rambo. They was relatively easier. And yeah, and I'm enjoying the job so far.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is really something important to keep in mind, that the first job that you have after the PhD, like, it doesn't have to be the perfect job. Yeah. So it's often, yeah, this opportunity to learn, understand the field that you're in, the industry, and then move on to something that is maybe more fitting, or maybe in a region where you want to live. Like, as you said, Munich, I mean, it's super expensive. So I know because I've studied there. So it's, yeah, really challenging to find an apartment there. And then, yeah, also considering, yeah, these other aspects. So where do I want to live? Which place would make me happy, and then start looking for jobs there. So absolutely also very valid criteria. Yeah, and maybe you can share a little bit, what does your role at Currenta look like? So kind of the day-to-day tasks. So are you a lot in the office or also traveling? What are you doing there?
Mhm. Yeah, that would be nice.
Hmm.
If you don't mind, I would like to give a bit of more detailed information about Currenta, just
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
and then I would share about my role specifically because Currenta, as I already said in my last answer, it used to be part of Bayer. It used to be called Bayer Industrial Services.
Mhm.
So Currenta does not produce any chemical, even though it's kind of right there in the sites, which is called
Mhm.
Chempak in Leverkusen. So,
Mhm.
but Currenta manages the Chempak. So
Mhm.
even though it does not produce its own chemical, but it's kind of managing all of the facility, like the waste management, the logistics, the security, Yeah, everything you need to make a city run. So the
Mhm.
park itself is like a city. It's like a chemical
Mhm.
city. And then it has its own electricity, its own security, water, waste management. So Currenta manages all of that. But in addition to that, Currenta also then has, so that's the team that I work in. We have analytical laboratory services. This also used to be part of Bayer. So overall, Currenta has about 5,400 employees. We have 3 Kempak sites in Leverkusen. That's the one that I work in Dormagen, and in Krefeld Oerdingen. These are like very
Mhm.
close to each other, so
Mhm.
far from each other.
So
And they are about, I would say, in the Kempak itself, about 60,000 employees work there for different companies. I think companies there are also quite a lot, maybe like over 60 companies. And of course, the biggest ones there are Bayer, like I said, Covestro, but there are several other companies there, smaller companies, also like startup companies. So if you're thinking about starting up something, Currenta also offers some, chemical startup facility and stuff like that. Um, so then I would now talk a bit about like the thing that I'm working on, which is called analytics. So there we offer analytical chemistry services. So any kind of analytical chemistry services, from chromatography to NMR, name it, everything Coretta offers. But then I work in a small team that is called product compliance. And this typically, just like I said, the whole laboratory services, we also support the companies on the Kempak. But to know that when these companies produce, they also need a bit of advanced support for the products that they produce. And that's how my team came to be. That even though all of these companies have their own internal product stewardship and compliance managers, we support them with advanced topics. So we have a bit of more insight into environmental topics, environmental hazards. And because we also have the wastewater treatment plant there, we also have data. We have access to data that the companies individually do not have. So as a result, yeah, and so that's basically my job. And so my job is mainly focused on REACH regulation. I don't know if anyone here has heard about that. It's the regulation in Europe focused on industrial chemicals. By the way, there are other regulations focused on pesticides, focused on biocides, on food contact materials, but my role specifically is focused on industrial chemicals. And there, as I said, performing this advanced risk assessment, which requires, checking the science, basically applying state-of-the-art science, because as you know, science is always changing. Science of last 5 years, if you check it today, there's already new insight. So my job is to, you know, figure out which new insights can help us improve the state of our compliance. Maybe there's a new information that says, oh, this chemical is harmful. Okay, how can we integrate it, and all of that? So in my typical work requires that I work with clients a lot. So mainly I'm working with clients, I'm having calls with clients. I need to understand their problem and their challenges. And even in some cases, if I cannot solve their problem, I need to figure out how to solve it. So my problem is basically problem solving for the clients. In addition to that, I'm also representing the clients in conversations with the authority, because the clients need to defend their documentation to the authority, which is like the EU Commission, or even to like the ECHA, that's the European Chemical Association. So sorry, agency. And there I also represent the clients in conversations with this authority, sometimes also in high stake meetings. And yeah, I would say that would be like I don't know. I hope that was not too long, but
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing, giving these insights. Yeah, what would you say, if like somebody is interested in transitioning into such a role, after the PhD? what would you recommend to them?
Yeah, thanks. So I think this is important to know that there are several ways or pathways to reach a goal. So my own pathway might not fit into someone else, and of course, we know we all have different ways how we approach problems. But nevertheless, I would still recommend a few points, maybe 2 to 3 points that I think anyone who is interested in the whole regulatory landscape, whether it's for chemicals or for pharmaceuticals, or regulation is kind of everywhere so far you have a product. So for anyone interested in that, the first thing I would do if I'm doing my PhD, or even if it's a master, is that I need to check what is the intersection between my research and the regulation. Because I said the regulation, there are numerous regulations. So for example, I'm working on pesticides, the regulation for that. I need to check what is the intersection between them, and if possible, begin to familiarize myself with the regulatory aspects of my research. Now, this has a lot of benefits. If I did my PhD again, I would benefit a lot from the regulatory science, because in my opinion, the science that has been applied or implemented in the regulatory is a bit kind of advanced than science in academia. So which means I can learn a lot from the scientists who write the regulatory science. The scientific part of it are the best in the world. So which means in that case, just by familiarizing myself with the regulatory aspect of my research, I get to learn about advanced science, which helps me, but also this prepares you for a job in that field in the future. So that's the first thing I would do. Number two is that definitely I would go to where these people meet, conference. For me, if you guys don't know, so it's a CTAC. I'm also like an official of CTAC, so maybe I should say a bit about that. It's Society for Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry. CTAC brings together, regulators and industry professionals across the world. So if you want to learn more about this and as a PhD student, these are opportunities for you to present your research, kind of get exposure into how it intersects to regulation, and also meet people that are working in the field. So for me, this was crucial that over the years I had exposure to professionals in this field. And the third thing that I would recommend is to simply just, be the best at your research, be passionate about it, help to communicate your research when necessary. This is like the typical PhD advice, just do your best at your research. And I believe the value will be clear to other people when they see your research.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Fola, for giving this advice. And I think joining professional associations like CTAC or whatever organization might be like relevant in the particular field that somebody is working in, this is really helping. You have to get to know people, find somebody to maybe do informational interviews with. Yeah. Yeah. So we're almost out of time. So if you have questions, please feel free to put the questions in the chat. So if you have any questions for Fola, feel free post your questions in the chat. And yeah, while we're waiting for potential questions here to come up, maybe one more question, because so Fola, you studied in Nigeria, then you came to Germany for another master's degree and the PhD. So do you have any specific recommendations for international PhD students who are thinking about staying in Germany, finding a job in Germany after the PhD? Do you have any tips for them?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I can definitely share from my own experience. I mean, I've been sharing about my experience in the last few minutes. And I would say my most important tip, which probably everyone knows already, so probably it is redundant, is to acquire German language proficiency. I know this is difficult, so I have experienced this. And when I say acquire German language proficiency, I do not mean to be perfect in German. It simply means acquire intermediate German language proficiency to be able to apply, confidently apply to jobs in German, and to partially interview in German. So this was something that we would do the whole interview in German. The hiring manager just wants to know that you at least have some level of German, which means you are able to do the introduction of yourself in German, and then you can ask for the other parts to be in English. While you do that, this gives them the impression that, oh, yeah, you would cope, and I think this is really crucial. Um, the second one is to, of course, understand how to apply for jobs in Germany. There are a few silent rules that if you do not learn or really ask about, like for me, as I said, when I wanted to start applying, I had to ask someone who is an expert to review my document and give me tips. So you need to know the silent rules. Sometimes it's about, do you add a photo or not? Sometimes some people add all of their date of birth and all of that on their CV. So there are silent rules which you should apply to your CV and also to your cover letter. Understand this. This is like the basics. And of course, don't also give all the information on your CV. You only give the information that is necessary. So, but of course, this is important. Package your CV and cover letter as good as possible. And then when it comes to, this will be the third one, and I would stop. Even though there are more, But, so when it comes to you being an international, you need to also think about, what do I bring to the table? Like what advantage can I bring to the job market that kind of makes me special, gives me an advantage. In my case, it could be, for example, my experience in Nigeria as a chemist. In Germany, I didn't study anything chemistry, but of course, my chemistry knowledge in Nigeria definitely, contributed to my overall profile. But also the fact that when I also moved to Germany, I had, you know, studied or done internships all around Europe. So that, of course, gave people confidence that, oh, it's very international. So my international did not just come from me coming from Nigeria, but the fact that I'd participated in research activities all across Europe, in Netherlands, also in France. And yeah, so just find your own special. So think through your profile and from the beginning, and think about what makes me special, and then make that clear in your
Yeah.
documentation.
Yeah. I think this is really super important. Yeah, that you, because I think often people, and not just international students, I think often the focus is on, okay, what do I not know? Like, what are the weaknesses? Like, for example, oh, my German is not so good. But to then really sit down and think about, well, but what do I have to offer? Yeah, maybe my German is not perfect, but I speak some other languages. I have this very international experience, for example. So I think this is really, really a key thing. And yeah, so we have a question in the chat. So Fola, so what would you recommend for somebody who didn't have any contact with regulatory affairs during their research, but they are now interested in transitioning into this field? Do you have any recommendations there?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that question. So it is important to know that, like, for me, maybe I had an advantage in the fact that I had contact already. But if you already have no contact with this field, of course, the first tip would be try to have contact, which is, um, there are several regulations out there. Try to figure out the one that is most related to your research. If none is related, that's also fine. But in case there is one regulation related to your research, that should be your starting point. So and then you start to familiarize with this documentation. I would admit that this is a Herculean task, and it's very complex to do this by yourself without external help. Of course, but you need to try. If you try and you see, oh, this is, you won't even understand where to start from. There's so many documentation, the regulation is so huge, but at least you start first from which regulation is kind of related to my research. Now, when you get to that block where you are confused that, oh, there's too many things that you don't even know where to start from. And then that comes the point where we, Iris and I already mentioned, which is informational interview. You need external support. Even here, I'm not sure your professor might be able to support you if this regulation is something that is related to your research. Of course, they would know about it. But in case it is not, then you definitely need to do information interview and just reach out to people on LinkedIn or in your network and try to figure out someone who can kind of tell you where to start from. That okay, just they could even recommend PDFs for you, and this would be a lifesaver. Because when you then begin to familiarize with this basically is simple as upskilling and training yourself. Thinking the regulation is all you need to do.
Yeah.
At least answers a bit the question.
Yeah, and there's a second question, which is, I would say, kind of related to this. So the question is about, are there any like certifications that you could maybe get or that you could recommend to people who would like to transition into regulatory affairs? So some kind of certificates that you could get beforehand.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. There are certifications. However, these certifications are for experts in the field. So, like for example, CTAC, the society that I talked about, they have a certification called IBERA, which is International Board of Environmental Risk Assessors. I am an IBERA diplomate, for example, but to get this certification, I needed to have 3 years of experience after my PhD, and I needed to write an exam. So this is not accessible to people who are not yet in this industry. Also, people, if you are like an expert in biology or human toxicology, there's also a certification for that as well. But as I said, it's also for experts. Nevertheless, there are, I won't call them certifications, but some kind of training courses that you could follow. For example, CETAC offers those as well. So I'm not advertising CETAC. It's just, CETAC is just made for that. So when you go to CETAC, at every conference, they offer training courses. And this also helped me. But they are not like holistic or encompassing, but they offer like bits, part of this whole puzzle. And every year, I always take part in one training course. It could be statistics of regulatory data. It could be alternative to regulatory experimentation. CETAC offers those, and bit by bit, you build the knowledge base to also make you an expert, even without actually having a job. So that would be what I recommend for anyone who is not yet in the industry, to simply seek out training programs, but they should also be from accredited and acknowledged institutions like CETAC. There are also other organizations that offer those, like also the CETAC German language branch. If you can speak German, there's also like a training course for like that is in German. So this would be what I would do to kind of gain the edge in start applying.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then we have another question. So what are possible entry roles in regulatory affairs? And do they usually require some level of experience? So, I mean, you already talked a little bit about, of course, your your entry role as a consultant. So, do you have some other examples of different roles, entry roles in that field?
Yes, definitely. So in regulatory affairs, you could work as a consultant or in the industry, which is like the people who produce. Consultants are the people who support the people who produce with advanced tasks. So you could work in these two areas. But there's one more actually. You could also work with the government, because these are the three pillars of, or these three pillars they need regulatory scientists or regulators. Now the three, I would say, as an entry level, require similar level of expertise. Of course, consultants are the most is the most difficult, not to get into, but the most challenging when it comes to transitioning because of the whole time factor. But they all require similar level of expertise. So, which means familiarity with the regulation, your research expertise, maybe in toxicology or ecotoxicology or environmental science or biology or chemistry or statistics. Because it's a very interdisciplinary field. So, if you do not study like ecotoxicology like me, you don't need to. So there are other science PhDs or master degree that gives you access to entry level jobs in this field. That being said, so if you go into the job market, which means just check Indeed or LinkedIn, where these jobs are being posted, you might likely find more jobs from consulting. I might be wrong, but this is just my impression. I've not, done the statistics, but my impression is that there are more consulting companies and they offer more roles, because people use consulting also as like a step up because it's a good place to start working. You learn a lot and then people then move to industry. Well, it doesn't have to be like that for you, but you would notice that you find lots of consults. And it is important to know, like what I just said, that consulting roles are different from industry roles. So which means just knowing that alone and approaching your interview like that makes you gives you a lot of advantage. Most people don't know the difference and therefore they approach the interview as a consultant and in the industry the same way. But with this information that I've given today, I hope this would help you a lot when you approach consulting roles. But overall, I would say a PhD or even a master degree is enough to apply to entry level roles. And many people also think that maybe, of course, a PhD gives you a lot of soft skills that others might not have, but a master degree would also have similar level of soft skills. So I think yeah.
Would you say that like the PhD title for certain roles like gives you an advantage because it, I don't know, shows a certain expertise or seniority? Do you have that experience in that field?
Yes, PhD title gives advantage. However, when you compare it to someone with a master degree who has actually done a lot of internships in the industry in these roles, then as a PhD, you need to really package yourself. So I think we didn't talk about this, but I know Iris, this is probably one of the topics that you're dealing with, which is that as a PhD, we always think that yes, that we have a PhD and therefore we don't need to pay attention to how we package our documentation. We need to ensure that we convey our skills properly. So, and this is the only way we are attractive, because the people on the other side, in the industry or in consulting, they are not just interested in the PhD. That is interesting for them, but they're interested in what other things do you bring to the table. And if someone with a master degree who has already gained exposure in terms of internships in this field, then they become more viable. For me, for example, I'd done, I would say, an internship in a contract lab already. And of course, this also improved my profile a bit. So mostly as a PhD, it's not a magic joker into the industry. You need to still do the basics of completing your skills properly. And
Yeah, I think it's really important that you don't just rely on the PhD title and think that's going to get you the job, but that you really think about, okay, so what skills, competencies are required for this this position, and do I have that? Which examples or experiences do I have that I could talk about? And showing that you really understand what is required for that role. Yeah, not just showing up and being like, oh, I have a PhD title and hire me. Yeah, I think that is really, really key. All right. So, yeah, I don't see any more questions in the chat, and we're also already a little bit over time. So then, yeah, I would suggest that we finish here. Unless Fola, do you have something that you wanted to, yeah, to share, or some final tips that you wanted to share with everybody?
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for the opportunity, Iris. First of all, for inviting me to this podcast. By the way, I've been following your podcast, but also to prepare myself for today. I tried to listen to some of your the podcast in German. Yeah, this was a good exercise for me. Like I listened to one with Michaela, who I know as well, and also one with I think one other regulatory affairs manager. So
Yeah, Christian. Mhm.
for me. And just by the side, there was one thing that Michaela said that when she moved, that she realized that people used less English in uh, in 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 non-academic spaces. This was also my experience. And initially, when I moved here, I misinterpreted it and said that, oh, it looks like in Leipzig, where I did my PhD, people there speak more English, but in North Rhine-Westphalia or in Leverkusen Cologne area, because people hardly spoke English at work. Even though this improved my German proficiency, I was forced to speak more German, but I was interpreting it as Leipzig, Cologne differences. However, from this Michaela impression, it was clear to me that this is actually academic and non-academic atmosphere. Basically, in non-academic atmosphere, it appears that people just speak more German and less. During the PhD, we never had any problem. Everyone spoke English easily. So I just wanted to say that thing. And my last words would be, I think I've shared almost everything that I would like to share, but just still that we need to prioritize soft skills, transferable skills, because as you may know that your technical expertise may not directly be related to the job you want to apply to. But that's fine. Actually, hiring managers don't care about that too much. If there's a mismatch between, let's say, your technical expertise was on, I don't know, microorganisms, and then you're applying to a role that is a bit different. They don't care about that too much because they know you can learn the technical, and that's one of your strengths as a PhD. But then the soft skills become important. And my framework for soft skills is 4 C's. Critical thinking. This is highly important. I mean, we have this in the PhD, but I think we need to also be aware that we have this and we need to apply it. Collaboration. I believe that out of academia, collaboration becomes more necessary because a PhD is more independent. But to solve problems out of academia, I basically need to do it with my colleagues. I talk to the client, talk to the authority, uh, um, also, then what's the first one? Creativity. I connect this to problem solving, which is that non-standard approach to solve problems because now I need to be creative, and this is something that I use every day in my job. And the last C, that's keep my mind right now.
Communication, maybe?
Oh, no. Actually, that's the most important C. Communication. Yes, that's the most important. So, um, you know, fortunately, during my first job at Rambo, I already learned that, writing emails, as simple as it is, requires, especially when you're working as a consultant, you need to think about your client in mind. How can I write this lengthy email in a way that they would read it once and they would understand the main point? So not it to remove the non-important information. And so writing emails or written communication is really, really important. And thinking about it, like with my colleagues, sometimes we sit for 30 minutes strategizing how to write an email because we know the importance of that we don't just write it as it is. We need to, strategize. And also, then when it comes to like in-person communication as well, like, oral communication presentations, slide presentations and all of that, this is basically the biggest part of my work because I do this. This is what I do constantly every day. And so communication is the biggest. See, and I don't know how I forgot it was very serious. for reminding me that. And
Yeah.
so I would say sharpen these skills and convey them on your document, the cover letter. It has to be clear because this is what hiring managers are looking for, not only your technical expertise. With that, I would like to, wrap up and say thanks a lot, Iris. I really enjoyed it, and also the collaboration with you. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Fola, for joining us. So this was our final career talk in 2025. So I'll continue with this series next year, and so I'll share then the dates and upcoming talks and on LinkedIn. Yeah, and then I hope everybody has a nice end of the year and nice holidays, and maybe I'll see you again then at another career talk in the future. So thank you, Fola, and bye bye.
Bye bye.